Hello, my name is Clayton, and welcome to episode number 94 of the Watch Dog podcast. I'm a professional dog runner and watch enthusiast talking to his pals about dogs and watches. How are you all doing? Thank you so much for listening. You know I appreciate it. Well, yes, coming off of the unofficial end of summer, Labor Day weekend, 3-day extravaganza. Oh, God, it's early. I sure hope you had a good one if you live in the United States or Canada, as we found out last week. I had a pretty low-key weekend. My wife and I went to see Richard Marx, soft rock star of the late 80s and early 90s. If you're younger than me, I'm 45. If you're younger than me, Google it. Chances are you've heard some of his music. Programming note, also with it being Labor Day weekend last weekend, Bobby Legs and I did not record Watch Soup, so you did not see it on the Watch Soup live stream feed or get it here as a podcast. But we'll be back in action. We're recording Monday, September 9th, because my beloved Detroit Lions open the season on Sunday, September 8th. We typically record Watch Soup live Sunday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern, but as much as I love you guys and I love Bobby, I'm not missing the first Lions game of the year for Watch Soup or much else. So, yeah, programming note, you'll get that as a podcast next week, and we'll be doing it live on YouTube Monday evening, September 9th at 9 p.m. In 2014, the English singer-songwriter Sam Smith had a huge hit with Stay With Me. Again, I'm not going to sing any of it, and we're getting into some litigious nonsense here, so I'm not going to play any of it either, that's for sure. But I will leave a link to the video in the show notes so you can check it out. Two songwriting legends, Tom Petty and Jeff Lynne. Jeff Lynne, you may know from ELO. He was also in the Traveling Wilburys with Tom Petty, wrote a lot of big songs with Tom Petty. These guys heard this song and thought it sounded very much like the 1989 Tom Petty hit, I Won't Back Down, that they co-wrote. You guys probably know that song. I'll again include a link to that in the show notes. I'm old, so that song is very familiar to me, where Stay With Me, maybe not so much. I remember that song, but I mean, gosh, I've been hearing I Won't Back Down since I was a kid. So, of course, I remember that one. These guys thought Stay With Me sounded so much like I Won't Back Down that they filed a copyright dispute. That's right. They sued. They sued Sam Smith and the other two writers on Stay With Me. Sam Smith was only 22 at the time and claims he never even heard I Won't Back Down, and any similarities were a coincidence, right? I think that kind of thing can happen with music. There's only so many notes, and sometimes things are going to sound like something else, whether intentional or not. You know, all the parties came about this in a very amicable way and agreed that this type of thing, like I said, can happen. They settled, accepting the similarities and giving Petty and Lynne songwriting credits on Stay With Me. They are now listed as co-writers and get a whopping 12.5% of any royalties from that song. That's pretty crazy to me. I am going to try to find a link to a video that I watched that actually lines the songs up, because when you hear Stay With Me, I don't know. If I didn't know about this lawsuit, I wouldn't get I Won't Back Down from that at all. But clearly Tom Petty and Jeff Lynne heard it and they won. And now they get 12.5% of any royalties. Well, Tom Petty left us in 2017, sadly. One of my favorite artists. Got to see him live, thankfully. But yeah, his estate and Jeff Lynne, who's still with us and making music, yeah, they get 12.5% of any royalties generated from that song. And it was a big hit. I believe it won some Grammys, or was nominated anyway. Can you imagine if that happened in the watch world? With all the homages and, let's call it what it is, copy watches out there. Now, there's been a few cease and desist letters written in the last couple of years. I know Tudor wrote a cease and desist letter to the micro brand NTH. NTH makes some original designs, I think, but mostly doing homages of Tudor watches. I think they've even had some Doxa homages or copy watches. I use homage lightly here. Basically stealing Tudor's design to sell watches. They were using snowflake hands. Tudor didn't like it and wrote them a cease and desist letter. I think that was financially tough for Chris Vail and NTH, because I'm sure they ordered and already put snowflake hands on, a number of watches, and they had to switch to sword hands. And ironically, NTH just announced, 2 days ago, I believe, that they are ceasing operation. They are going out of business. Wonder if that had anything to do with it, this whole Tudor snowflake hands situation. I'm sure they felt a financial burden from it. And then I think I talked about it on a podcast last year. Cartier went after DeLugs. Cartier has a proprietary bracelet and strap attachment system on the Santos. DeLugs was making, an aftermarket strap. There's only so many colors and styles of strap that you can get from Cartier, in-house to put on. So DeLugs was giving us another option. But since it's a proprietary system, Cartier had to enforce the trademark. And they went after DeLugs, and now DeLugs does not make that strap anymore. Wouldn't it have been great if Cartier and DeLugs could have gotten together like Sam Smith and Tom Petty? Listen, I know there's some similarities, but why don't we all get in on this? Cartier gets a piece of the action from DeLugs. DeLugs benefits because they still get to make the strap and they make money that way. And we benefit because we get a lot more options. But unfortunately, that was not the case. Well, why on earth am I talking about this? Well, recently I stumbled upon a video on the Just the Watch YouTube channel, hosted by Dave. Dave seems like an awesome guy. I know we've covered some of his videos on Watch Soup before. I think he's even joined in on the chat when we've covered his videos. Seems like an amazing guy. Lives in Japan. He covers mostly affordable watches. And, lately I don't even watch individual watch reviews all that much. Since I do co-host Watch Soup, we're always on the lookout for topical videos that we can discuss on that show. So for the most part, that's what I'm looking for. But for whatever reason, this video popped up and I just happened to be in the right mood and I clicked on it. And it's watches that I would never even really be interested in. Watches from the brand San Martin. I think they get lumped in, and rightfully so, with the Pagani design of the world and the AliExpress brands because they make copies of well-known watches. Now, they are allegedly, and we're going to get to this, they are allegedly branching out into original design watches. Maybe you will be the judge of that here as we get further into this discussion. But whatever reason, I clicked on the video and he said, the paid advertisement banner came up. He said, I received these watches from San Martin. I don't have to give them back. No additional compensation was received to make this video, and they have no creative control over what I can say. Okay, so that's how he starts. And then he introduces a couple watches, and he says they are original designs. As far as he knows, they are not copies of any other watches. And the first watch he showed was a GMT, the SN0129 GMT. Now, he said this is an original design, and I immediately called bullshit on that. I said, no way, this is a copy of the Grand Seiko SBGE 283 and 285 Evolution 9 Series GMT watches. They look identical to me. San Martin got the bezel design from that watch. And in the comment section, I said, listen, this is a copy watch. This is not an original design. No way. And several other people said that as well. Dave even came back and said, which watch is it a copy of? And I said, Grand Seiko SBGE 283, 285 Evolution 9 Series GMT. Bezel looks identical. And then he came back and he doubled down on his original statement, saying, no, I mean, the case is different. The dial is different. Indices are different, blah, blah, blah. And I just said, you know what? I think it's a copy watch, because if that Grand Seiko didn't exist, this San Martin wouldn't exist. It would be another watch derivative of a design from a big brand. And I'm cynical about these watches. If you like them, that's cool. We're not really going to argue about that today. But I really want to argue about what's an original design and what isn't. I think it's a copy watch because it reminded me exactly of that watch. And then the dials they're using, are derivative of other watches. I know other YouTubers have covered this watch. Jody from Just One More Watch also said this is an original design. He covered the different variations of this San Martin SN0129, and he agreed with Dave. Original design. A couple other YouTubers were a little more reasonable, in my opinion. Watch Chris covered this watch and immediately agreed it looked like the Grand Seiko. He didn't say it was a direct copy, but it shares characteristics with the Grand Seiko. And then Top Tier Ticker, I believe his name is Karan. He said it's a copy. He was more in line with my way of thinking. But there seemed to be a lot of disagreement. The San Martin fans said, this is an original design. This does not look like that Grand Seiko. And certain people will chime in and say, there's no such thing as an original design anymore. Everything is a copy of something else. Blah, 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 blah. The Submariner copied the Blancpain 50 Fathoms. Yeah, we've all heard that before. I don't buy that at all. You look at the current watch market, there's a lot of original watches coming out. You just have to look for them. I think it's just an excuse for design theft. But again, that's just me. So what do we call a watch if we're not going to call it a blatant copy? Because that description is not good enough for several fans of this watch. It seems to be selling very well. Dave and Jody don't think it's a copy. Watch Chris thinks it's on the border, copying some elements. So that got me thinking. That got me thinking about music. And we're all familiar with cover songs. When an artist covers a popular song from another artist, All Along the Watchtower, Jimi Hendrix made it famous. That's a Bob Dylan song. How about Johnny Cash, Hurt? Very famous song. He released that kind of right before he died. He looks very frail in the video. He nailed that song, but that's not an original composition. That's a cover song by 9 Inch Nails. Usually, they keep the lyrics the same. Everything is the same, but sometimes they change up the lyrics a little bit, right? I know we're probably not supposed to talk about Puff Daddy right now because he's involved in horrible, scandalous things. Terrible. He's a terrible human being. Let's just face it. Allegedly, but I think there's video proof of him being a scumbag. So not condoning anything he did, but in the late 90s, after the notorious B.I.G. passed away, he released a song called I'll Be Missing You, sung to the tune of Every Breath You Take by The Police. Lyrics were different, but the music was pretty much the same, and it was sung in that same melody. So I consider that a cover song, but it was changed up. And you better believe Sting got royalties from that song, right? Like we talked about with Sam Smith and with Tom Petty and Jeff Lynne getting royalties from a song they had nothing to do with, but still got songwriting credits on because it was found to sound like a song Tom Petty and Jeff Lynne had wrote. So you better believe Sting, who wrote Every Breath You Take, how much do you think he got? If Tom Petty and Jeff Lynne got 12.5% of Stay With Me, I'm willing to bet Sting got, 40 to 50% of the royalties from I'll Be Missing You? I think he said somewhere that song put his kids through college. I believe he said that. I'll try to look for that quote. But yeah, what if that happened in the watch world? Could Grand Seiko theoretically go after San Martin for, stealing the bezel design? The bezel's identical. I'm going to put links to all of these watches in the show notes, so you'll be able to see and judge for yourself. And please let me know. Reach out. Do you think this San Martin is a copy of the SBGE 283 and 285? They're doing different dials. Watch Chris said the dials look like Chopek. They're doing that like desert sand sort of dial. There's an Aventurine dial on the San Martin. So, they're not identical, but they're stealing the main elements. And I stand by my belief that this San Martin would not exist if the Grand Seiko did not exist. So is this a cover song? Should Grand Seiko get some royalties from it? It'd be impossible for them to go after. There's so many brands, and we're not singling out a certain country here, but there's a lot of brands in China that are making these type of watches, the copy watches. It would be really expensive to go after all of them, and almost impossible. Rolex, I mean, gosh, so many cover versions, if you will, of the Submariner, right? I mean, how are they going to go after that? How are they going to enforce that design trademark? They can't. It's not worth their time and money. And these watches are not really direct competitors. So Grand Seiko, Rolex probably feel it's just not worth their time. Now, Tudor did go after NTH for the snowflake hand thing. Maybe it was a little easier to go after them. I don't know the particulars of that. If someone does, please reach out. I couldn't find a whole lot on that. But then there's another thing that happens in music called sampling. And it's a little bit different from a cover song. It happens a lot with hip hop. They'll sample like rock songs and use that beat, but then kind of change up the lyrics and the melodies. Famous one. I don't think he actually got their permission right away. Vanilla Ice, Ice Ice Baby. Do 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 do. That is Queen and David Bowie's Under Pressure. Instantly recognizable, but then he totally changed up, the rap. It was a rap song, totally changed up the lyrics, not sung in the original way that Under Pressure was sung. So different from what Puff Daddy did with the Police song. So is this watch a cover song or a sample? It's tricky. It's a slippery slope. I think it all depends how you feel about design theft. The people who are into these watches don't really care about original designs, or they might care, but they don't put it at the forefront. The best specs possible, a spec monster. That's what we want. Original design just isn't important to some people. When I started, and I've said this before as well, I was with them. I watched Jody. I couldn't understand why people bought these quote unquote overpriced Seiko watches when they could get something like a Pagani with sapphire crystal. I remember Jody used the sapphire tester, real sapphire crystal, for like $100. Seiko's charging over $1,000 before you get sapphire. I'm not sure that's what it is, but just go with me here. But now that I'm many years into the hobby, specs, like I said a couple weeks ago, specs just don't matter to me. So I've left these watches behind. Story matters to me. If I'm spending a lot of money on a watch, I've got to care about it. I've got to want to wear it. Otherwise, I'm going to sell it. That's just my personality. So, watches like this San Martin that, sure, you're getting a fine watch for, I think they're like $300 too. And I can't even imagine paying that much for one of these. But again, I'm trying not to come off as negative if you do like these watches. I'm really not. That's just not where my priorities are with the hobby. I really value what it takes to design a watch. I started a business from the ground up. That was a lot of hard work, coming up with an original idea, spending the money to plan, taking all the precautions, and then working my butt off. And I've had people in the past, someone that worked for me before, kind of try to steal my idea and use my brand name in a way. And I called them out on it and they stopped. But I worked way too hard for somebody to infringe on that. And I mean, I think the people that like these watches, how would you like it if somebody stole something from you? You wouldn't like it. But yet I think we wear these watches and we don't really care about the blatant design theft that goes on. So that's just not important to people. People would rather have that sapphire crystal on a watch and 200 meters water resistance with a screw down crown and have the watch look like something that is much more expensive than it is. I don't know. If it's me, I'd rather get mugged for the real thing. But I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm kind of rambling at this point. But yeah, what do we call these watches when it's not a one-for-one copy? Is it more of a cover song where someone else is doing a version of it? Or is it a sample where, San Martin sampled that bezel from the Grand Seiko, but maybe the case is a little different. Maybe the indices are a little different. Maybe the dials are sampled from the Chopek and it's all put together. It's not an homage. I think an homage is paying reverence to something. NTH said they used the snowflake hands to pay homage. No, it's because you wanted it to look like an inexpensive version of a Tudor so people would buy it. Homage is, I think, what a lot of independent brands do with Breguet hands. The Breguet hands are an homage to him and his innovations. That's what I consider an homage. And they're called Breguet hands. So in the description of the watch, they will say Breguet style hands or Breguet hands. I think that's paying homage. Putting the same bezel of a watch that was just released last year or the year before on your San Martin. Sorry, I don't consider that an homage. I consider that stealing a design from a popular watch so you can sell a version of it for much less. That's what I call it. So, all right. I'm going to stop here because I'm not sure this is making any sense. We'll find out when I go back and edit it. But do you think this San Martin, and again, I will post a picture of it in the show notes. Do you think this is an outright copy, a cover song with a twist, or a sample, perhaps, right? So cover song with a twist might be I'll Be Missing You, or Hurt, because it's done completely different by Johnny Cash than it is Nine Inch Nails. I think Trent Reznor even said Johnny Cash took that song from us. He made that song his own. It's not ours anymore. It's his now, right? Or is it Ice Ice Baby using Under Pressure in that bass line? Let me know what you think. Do you think I'm an idiot? Yeah, I might be after this one. I'm not sure. We'll see how this sounds. But anyway, thank you so much for listening. Would love a review. Subscribe. Give a thumbs up on YouTube. If you subscribe to the channel, these will come up as videos. If you'd rather consume it that way instead of Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I welcome you to do that. Comment on the bottom of that video and I can engage with you there. Shoot me a message on Instagram. Send me a text message. However you want to reach out. I appreciate when you do. And we'll catch you next time on the next episode of the Watch Dang Podcast. See you later.